All right, welcome back to ThinkTech here on this beautiful Wednesday. We're going to have such a good time today. This is ThinkTech on 760 AM KGU, part of the Wall Street Business Network. Everyone knows that Hawaii is still primarily a land-based economy. Dreams of an innovation economy during the Lingle administration a few years ago have not come true today. In the day of high-tech paperless offices, many, if not most, local businesses, as well as businesses headquartered on the mainland, have shrunk their staff and space requirements. I have proof of this, and have found that they can do more or the same with fewer staff and less space. That's the operative word. To intensify the process, we're in a long-term recession, just like on the mainland. Not many new businesses are being organized, and many marginal businesses are failing or otherwise going out of business. These changes and the resultant transition in our downtown office real estate economy has a profound effect on the buildings and landlords there, and it falls on commercial brokers to try to put deals together even when it's hard to do that. Over the past few years, the occupancy rate and the, quote, absorption rate, which means how fast you fill up the empty spaces, reflecting the percentage of space occupied in the big buildings downtown, has come down and has essentially stayed down over the past few years. Does this present new opportunities for tech and other startups to come downtown and occupy that space? Will occupancy and rental rates increase in the years to come? What can landlords expect? What can tenants expect? What can startups expect in these difficult times? Our guest tonight is Downtown Jamie Brown, a longtime commercial real estate broker with Hawaii Commercial Real Estate, and we'll be talking with him about the commercial real estate market in Honolulu, and particularly the real estate market for tech startups in Honolulu, how it's been doing and where it seems to be going right now. Downtown Jamie Brown has been a commercial real estate broker more than 50 years now. 60?
And counting.
He has a vigorous style of brokerage and a vigorous commercial brokerage company. At one time, he was completely focused on placing startups in downtown spaces, and we want to talk to him about that, but that time may now have passed. How has Jamie and his company been doing in these times of the Sahara? Pardon me that term. Apparently, he has some time to spend with us here on a given Wednesday afternoon in a kind of a sort of recreational way, and I guess that means he doesn't have that much to do. So let's welcome him to the show for a frank and open and possibly scary or at least entertaining discussion about how commercial real estate and tech real estate are doing these days. Welcome to the show, Downtown Jamie Brown.
Well, I don't know what to say after that, Jay. Thank you so much.
Your appreciation.
I am downtown with Downtown J. Fidell.
All right. So I was thinking in the first part of the show here today, we ought to talk about how the real estate market is doing downtown. What's it like? Now you handed me and I was very impressed with this, a color format, something called the Hawaii Commercial Real Estate LLC Honolulu Office Market Report. It's a blank sheet of paper. No, I'm not kidding. Tell us what's on this report.
Okay, well, this is a report we do quarterly, and we count up vacancies every quarter, and then we do statistical analysis, and then we do a funny little, interesting little write-up of where we see the market. So this is I think probably the biggest thing to kind of keep in mind is that Honolulu's office market, as most of our commerce, is very downtown centric. Something like about 50% of all the office space on the island is in the roughly 3 blocks by 5 block grid that is downtown. And if you took the Class A office buildings, which is the big newer high rises, that's about almost 40% of the entire island. So we're very downtown centric, and the way downtown goes, the way the rest of the office market goes.
Something like General Motors. But just to take a point on that, people I know, in fact, this was discussed at a meeting at the Manoa Innovation Center with Governor Abercrombie and Steve Case when they visited there 2 weeks ago. One of the startups, I'm not sure you'd call him a startup, but it's Kevin Hughes, and his company is called InMobi. he's actually one of the sponsors of this show, indicated that he thought that there was a certain movement to Kaimuki. Kaimuki had, and I quote, restaurants, believe it or not, and a kind of lifestyle there that young startup companies might like. So, is there a movement, do you think? I mean, numerically, on a metrics basis, is there a movement out to Kaimuki as like a second downtown within the city?
Not enough to move the needle. When you look at the square footage that's in Kaimuki and East Honolulu, it's tiny. So if there was more space there, you might see more. And do you remember Spirent? They were
Yes,
AdTech originally. That was started by a UH professor testing
Sure.
network testing equipment.
Tarek Hawk? Was that Tarek Hawk?
Yeah, it started,
Weldon.
started by his father-in-law.
Yes, right, exactly, yes. I saw him recently.
Yeah. So they started in Kaimuki, and then they grew, and therein lies the challenge with any company that gets of significant size, and significant in Honolulu being maybe 30, 40 employees. There's really almost only one place, if they're an office user, they can go, and that's downtown.
Well, used to be they had I think it was Kapiolani, Hawaii Pacific Health had maybe it was a couple of hospitals had a incubator. It was actually in the old AmFac building there, and
Harbor Court. It was Harbor Court. Yeah.
Okay, and there were other possibilities of the same being discussed for a while. Incubators where you had little offices, little tiny offices and carrels and whatnot that would get rented, sort of a divided office situation. But that doesn't exist anymore.
Not really. I read about a little operation like that's in Kaka'ako behind the 680 building, or right in that block that Kamehameha Schools is redeveloping. Some guys, and I think it's very small, small scale.
You're talking about the greenhouse there.
Yes, yeah.
And that it's a quote a co-working space.
Yeah.
Then there's the Box Jelly a couple of blocks away, and there's promise there, and we should talk about that as a kind of alternative to downtown. But I agree with you. If I was in a tech company, I would really care about being close to networking, close to the banks, close to the ad agencies, close to the action in general, the insurance guys, the lawyers, you name it. All those service companies you need to have to start a business. And other businesses that I can make along. It's all about partnerships and affiliations, right? You want to build a company, the first thing you do is get connected to everybody you can. And so downtown's the best place for that.
And the other thing that we sort of take for granted being downtown is that sometimes just walking to, well, first of all, it's convenient to walk to meetings. You don't need to drive, so you save the time and the hassle of driving and parking. But think about it. How many times have you walked to a meeting and run into someone maybe you haven't seen in a while, which sparks up a business conversation or just generates other business?
Yeah, I love that about Honolulu, actually. I think it's one of the nicest things about the city, not only on the business level, but on the social level. You can't walk a block without running into people you know. I'm sure you have that experience all the time.
It's either there or Whole Foods and Kahala.
It's true. So if you don't meet anybody on your walk up Bishop Street, go out to Whole Foods
and Kahala
and improve your day.
Informal networking at its best.
What about Whole Foods in Kailua? Come on. Never mind. We're doing a program about them, by the way. Yeah. They got a new high-tech energy roof they just installed. We're going to do a program on that. Anyway, so
downtown is the interesting thing about downtown. So we have the most space downtown. We also have the most vacancy. So it's
what is it now? You have this written down on your office market report.
Well, we have the downtown Class A buildings. That's the big high rises is 14.6% vacant. That's if you include a little bit of sublease space, or if you took all of downtown, we got that at 15.8%. So that would include what we call Class B buildings.
Jamie, how does this compare with, say, 5 years ago?
The vacancy's up from 5 years ago. If you look at our little chart, we bottomed at the end of 2006 and started increasing in 2007, and it's kind of been mostly an upward march on vacancy since, except for 2009. And what happened there was the feds came to the rescue. I don't know if you remember the feds. The IRS took a bunch of space at Ali'i Place. The Immigration Service took a bunch of space at Waterfront Plaza, so something like 90,000 feet. And the thing that's really kept the lid on vacancy increases has been our friend, the rail program.
The what program?
The rail, the
Oh,
rail
yeah. Oh, they took
system.
a lot of space, didn't they?
Yeah, Hart has something like 60,000 feet at Elite Place.
That's like 4 floors, and it's a lot.
It's a lot. And Parsons Brinkerhoff, the main contractor, has I think about 30,000 feet at Bishop Square between the two towers. And then there's quite a number of other engineering and design firms that have space that is dedicated to or being used for the rail.
What a
project.
perfect segue for me to announce one of our ThinkTech programs. May I?
Go for it.
Oops, we're having a break. Let me assure you, Jamie, when we come back from this break, we're going to be talking about a program called Rail at the Crossroads. Which way now? That's Jamie Brown. I'm Jay Fidell. We're having a break. We'll be right back. Stay there. So much fun to do this, I swear to God. It really is. With guys like you, it's even more fun.
Well, you know, I'm performing twice today. After this, I am going out to Egaze for open mic night. We have a family band. It's a it's a garage band of kids and adults, and we're going to be playing some rock and roll tonight.
Are you on an instrument?
Yeah, I play guitar and I sing.
I could have assumed the singing part, the guitar part, I'm not so sure. I have to visualize that. It's almost.
Are these live? Well,
They're live for the tape, so whatever you say now, so you probably, should be careful because it's on Olelo, We don't put the ads on Olelo, we put the colloquy on Olelo.
So right now we're entertaining the audience.
Yeah, that's true. Smile. This is Jamie Brown. That's why this microphone is
Rent office space downtown now. I heard that ad for Pacific Cap. God, it's really it's like tech fell off the map. That's the scary thing.
Okay, we're back. This is Jamie Brown and me. And before we get back into the crux of things about the real estate market and the tech real estate market, I just wanted to finish my comment about Rail at the Crossroads. Which way now? That's a really interesting program that we're putting on. It effectively is a forum, possibly you could even call it a debate between both sides. One side, the pro-rail, and the other side, the anti-rail. And it's still quite relevant, despite that court case. It still goes on, and the issue is alive and well. So we'll have Cliff Slater on the anti-rail side. We'll have a guy named Wendell Cox, a consultant from the mainland, joining him. And on the pro-rail side, we'll have Daniel Grabowskis, everybody knows who that is, and a consultant from the mainland by the name of Todd Littman. This is on October 2nd at the Plaza Club. This will be one of those ThinkTech Hawaii Venture Capital Association programs, and this time it'll be a special on October 2nd. Look at hvca.org and sign up. Okay, Jamie, so, you don't paint a pretty picture here. You paint it's interesting on this report. You have the graph goes up. It's a little deceptive in the sense that everybody's always trained to see a graph that goes up as a good thing, but this is a bad thing. It's a vacancy level
That's right.
That's going up. Why is it going up? Tell us why.
Well, a couple things. One, let me just point out that it's a good news. Well, there's some good news story that at least we started to see downtown Class A buildings sort of buck the trend this last quarter. So they filled up they actually reversed the negative occupancy trend last quarter by increasing the occupancy a little bit. And the reason is that we talked before about the synergy about being downtown, and I also mentioned there's the number of choices. If you want, a 2,000 to 2,500 square foot space, you come downtown, you might have 30 choices. You go to Kaimuki, you might have 0. And believe it or
Kamuki's
not,
not that much cheaper, by the way,
And-
even though it's way out of the central district.
that's what I was going to point out. And that the lowest occupancy, some of the lowest occupancy costs, base rent and CAM, is downtown.
Isn't that interesting? That wasn't the case
Yeah.
years ago at all.
The best space, the most choices, and the most cost effective. That's why there's kind of been a flight to quality downtown.
Yeah, interesting. But have the rents gone down? I mean, that's the disconnect, or maybe it's a connect. You got to tell me. But so here we have an increase in vacancy, and that means, a lot of space is open and empty in these buildings. Sometimes it's palpable. You can walk through these buildings, you can feel the emptiness of the building. Not a good feeling at all. But does that mean that rental rates per foot are coming down? Does that mean what? What does it mean?
Well, rental rates actually have come down probably from the peak about 20%. That's the base rent portion.
Yeah.
And as most office tenants know, base rent's about half of what you pay.
Yeah.
The other half is so-called CAM or operating expenses.
So as an average, just so that people can sort of ideate where we are in dollars, what's an average base rent right now today? Oh, you're looking at another part of the report, aren't you?
I am. It's about the asking average rent's about $1.50 per square foot per month, and the CAM is about $1.50. So you add them up, it costs you about $3 a foot a month to rent office space on average.
Yeah. Well, $1.50 for operating expenses, that second half, that's more than it used to be, and I would assume that has a lot to do with the cost of oil. No.
The big pieces, and do you remember it was really 10 years ago the CAM or the operating expenses were under $1. They were like 90 something cents.
Yeah, not that long ago.
And the big pieces of it is electricity for your air conditioning, and so that's gone up dramatically. The hidden one is our friends at City Council. While they're keeping our residential real property tax rates low, they've continued to sock it to commercial property owners. So we've seen commercial property tax rates go through the roof in the last 10 to 15 years. And then you have insurance, and those are really the big ones.
You know why that is, by the way? It's that buildings under the United States Constitution do not have a vote.
They don't have a voice.
If you think that's funny, call us. It's 296-5467. Call us and see what kind of information you can pick out of Jamie Brown, downtown Jamie Brown. 296-5467. If you call us, we'll like that. If you don't call us, well, it's not the same thing. Anyway, so the $3, and that is what, substantially less, or at least notably less than what it was 5 years ago?
It's a little bit less, but the issue really is the base rent, which is what the landlords get to take home, has gone down, while the CAM has gone up. So from a tenant's perspective, the cost to occupy space really hasn't gone down, but the landlord's take of that rental check has gone down. So if the building owners are seeing the income from their office buildings, we're talking office buildings here, has actually gone down pretty dramatically in the last few years.
But you got to sort of integrate that with the cost of improvements, which means, for example, if I'm a tech tenant, I'm coming from some outlying place, making my big move downtown, I'm going to have to move in, and it's unlikely I'm going to find a space that's just perfect for me. Maybe a loft space would be better, actually. But I've got to do some improvements. I've got to do some wall changing, what have you, some construction. And that gets in the way of these rates, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The way the market is now is landlords for a credit tenant and a longer term lease, like a 5-year lease, they typically will fund the improvements so the tenant doesn't have to, his cost is his moving costs and is buying his furniture.
That's because of the vacancy rate. They want to get people in their buildings.
Yeah.
So they'll trot out their checkbooks and write the check.
Yep. And in hopes that when the tenant renews, that's when they'll get some profit out of the deal, because they won't have to invest money to re-tenant or to renew that lease.
So what I hear you saying is that this is a buyer's market.
It still is, and I would say it's probably it feels like we're at the bottom, and we're bumping along the bottom. And as you mentioned, one of the challenges is you look around and you don't see industries moving to Hawaii and taking office space. The tech industry.
We were talking. Let me just preface that. But then Jamie and I were talking about the show before the show, and I said we should talk about the tech industry, and he said, well, that would be a very short conversation. I said, well, we can't have dead air on this. Maybe a silent conversation. Let's see what you can make of that question. Kay, go ahead.
Well, unfortunately, with Act 221 and the recession, the demand for office space by tech companies is really cut back dramatically. There's really not much demand at all, I hate to say.
Yeah, if you have a company that's funded by angels or by 221 type tax incentives, where it's got some money in the till, then they can afford to get in a lease, they can afford to have rent. The landlord's going to be concerned, they don't want to deal with a fly-by-night. They got to see some substance. If there's no substance, they're not going to give a lease. And no company that doesn't have any money at all is going to enter into a lease either, because it can be very short-lived. So what we have now is the lack of that investment money, by reason of the lack of 221, but also the lack of investors, angels, who are actually investing in these companies, and they really have to stay in the garage, or in MIC, which is cheap rent. That's the Manoa Innovation Center on Woodlawn Drive in Manoa. But we did have a couple of companies that came out of Manoa recently. Can you talk about that? Oh, go ahead.
It's that pregnant pause.
Well,
what companies were those?
Well, there was two of them. One of them is Ikezo. I think that's public, that they're moving out of Manoa. They've graduated out of Manoa, and they're a very successful programming company, coding company. They have worked for some very big capital concentrations here and in Asia and on the mainland, including investment banks, would you believe, local company. And they're moving downtown, essentially, but not quite downtown, but near downtown. And that's a graduation, So they get out of the incubator up there and they move into the economy on the beach, so to speak. And that's a good thing for them. It's probably a good thing for Manoa Innovation Center, because they got now more space to give to another tech tenant. Another one of them is TerraSys. TerraSys is an electronics company. They actually build black boxes in TerraSys, which are communications boxes, as I recall. And they recently moved out of Manoa and into a space downtown. So
yeah, they went to, I think, Topa.
Right.
Topa.
Well, it's straight downtown, across the street here. So we are very impressed with that. We hope that continues. And I guess the question I would put to you is this a great time, assuming they have the money, they have some investment capital, they're actually funded. Is this a great time for tech companies, startup companies to come downtown?
You bet. You bet they can get low-cost, high-quality space, and downtown is wired with all the technology infrastructure so that they can operate the way tenants operate these days, which is from many different places.
That's true. They can get the fast wire.
That's right.
Got to have fast broadband, especially in computer plays and pure technology companies. I mean, if you're going to program, if you're going to deal with, your essential creative group over the continents, and some of them do, they operate by chat rooms, and there'll be a very small contingent of people here, but they'll have agents and representatives and affiliates all over the world. And there are companies at Manoa just like that. You really have to have fast wire. So downtown can provide that.
And one thing we talked about earlier was, Here's an interesting thought: is it's my sense that even though vacancy across the office market has gone up, and there's no statistic to back this up, but it's my feeling that we still have the same number of people employed in office space. They're just using fewer square feet.
That's absolutely true.
So every time tenant's lease comes up, expires, that tenant, suppose they have employ 30 people, they're going to figure out how to put those 30 people in a smaller box. So they're maybe not hiring, but they're not firing either.
Yeah.
And so I think you have the same number of bodies downtown than we did at the height, but you have more vacant space. And actually, the parking problem has gone away.
That's true. That's a very good point.
So you have the same number of bodies coming downtown, filling fewer square feet and bringing less cars.
So what does this mean? I mean, would you rather, in the larger scheme of things, would you rather see a hustle bustle downtown with, people in six-piece suits walking on Bishop Street, and buying everything in sight, and too crowded and everything is jammed up and rents are sky high and you can't find a parking space? Or would you rather see it the way it is now, Jamie? Hold your thought on that question. Because that's Jamie Brown. He's going to take a minute to think about that, and we're going to come back right after this break, and we're going to have some more really interesting points about the real estate market downtown and how tech companies get into it. This is Jay Fidell. You're on ThinkTech. Stay right there. We'll be right back.
Are there any? I wish there was, tech companies out there that were just chomping at the bit to grow.
I think a lot of them are. We have to talk about this again, but I think a lot of them are like terrified. Because they get nurtured. It's the cloth mother up there in Manoa, or wherever, in the garage.
Yeah.
But when they come downtown, oh, this is tough. This is the real deal. This is the big boys. You want to make a mistake down here, you get cut. So they're afraid, and so we should talk about how they can ameliorate that fear. And part of it is to get somebody to represent them, because I don't think a lot of them know the process. The interesting thing about tech companies is that they're used to, especially startups, they're used to doing it by themselves. They're used to being very resourceful, and they do their own research. They do their own research.
Yeah,
they
that's
do their
true.
own figuring. They get on the web. They believe they can solve any problem, and so
By themselves.
It makes them a little bit provincial in their own. Isn't that interesting how that works? And they're afraid to actually go out. In my perception, actually go out and engage, with a cigar smoking landlord. This is InMobi is the one I was talking about, where they have chat rooms. They deal by chat room. They connect up across the continents. They have a very small office here. Thank you. We're back, Jamie. Thanks for hanging around. We're back to follow the thought, about what happens. These startups, maybe they get too big for the space and the circumstances at MIC in Manoa, and they graduate. They got to graduate after a while, and then they need a place. And so, can they come downtown? What stops them from coming downtown? Well, I think a lot of them, I think tech entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in general are very self-reliant, as I mentioned during the break, and they tend to do things by themselves. And actually going out there and engaging with a cigar chomping landlord is hard for them. And I think it's intimidating for them to come down, into the world of grown companies, companies that have been through the wars, so to speak, companies that can deal, that, have the position of the marketplace to deal with a tough negotiating situation and all that. And so it's slightly intimidating. So my question to you here in this quarter of the show is, how do we soften that for them? How do we make that more, more appealing, more manageable for them?
Well, I've got a couple thoughts. The first, which I think you were alluding to earlier on the break, is that what they don't realize is that the way our business, the commercial real estate leasing business works, is that all these landlords pay a leasing commission when a lease gets signed, and that's how we get paid. And
You're representing more landlords than tenants, or more tenants than landlords?
both. And typically what happens is that the fee is shared between the guy who's on the tenant side of the table and the guy who's on the landlord side of the table. And what most of these tenants don't realize is that our service is paid for by the landlord, whether they use someone on their side of the table or not. So if they go do it themselves the way tech entrepreneurs like to do, they're really not going to save themselves any money, because the leasing commission is going to get paid anyways. And they're probably going to cost themselves a lot of money because they don't know. I mean, the asking rate is different than the taking rate.
Sure.
There's the little
They don't know how much different, that's all.
They don't know how much different. They don't know what goodies. They don't. So interestingly enough, the tenant rep broker like us actually it sounds counterintuitive. We get paid by the landlord to bring them a tenant and to get that tenant a better deal than the tenant would get if he did it himself.
Yes, very interesting. And somehow it's sui generis to this kind of situation. It doesn't exist across the board, but it happens in commercial and office leasing. There was a time when your company was really known as not only the downtown Jamie Brown company, but the company that was handling the tech companies that wanted to get into downtown. And in fact, there were landlords who were encouraging tech companies to come downtown. I recall, for example, Waterfront Plaza. They renamed the building, the Innovation Plaza, or some name like that, Innovation Center, which sort of showed you how interested they were in having tech companies. And you were involved in that process. What happened in that process, and is there anything left of it now?
A couple things happened. One, it was the late 90s, early 2000s was the telecom boom, and that ran its course. And then the tech boom occurred, and it really was fueled in part by the growth of the global economy and also locally by Act 221.
Yes, I agree.
And so when Act 221 went away, in addition to Lehman and everybody else in the 2008 recession, it really clamped down on the tech businesses in general. And interestingly, the tech businesses you see now are very small, which
That's
is probably
true.
what they need to be. They're
Light and fast and nimble and all that.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys.
Yeah.
When you had Act 221, they were a little more flush with cash, and they would hire probably faster than they should. They would probably lease more space than they needed. They bought more equipment. And then when the demand didn't pony up for their product or their service,
They collapsed.
And they just hung on till the 5-year Act 221,
And
tax.
the money was finished.
Yeah. So, but another thing I'd point out when you were asking what would a tech company, what are some of the pieces of advice for tech companies, one would be, and I see this so often in all kinds of office using businesses, they need to be more flexible in the type of space that they lease, the configuration. So you get these guys who walk in and they're going to have the perfect space for them. So I need 3 offices that are exactly 10 feet by 12 feet, and no, you need to take this office and you need to move the wall 3 feet from me, or
How about 18 inches?
Yeah, 18 inches, yeah. So it seems in all my experience in business for all these years is you can be a whole lot more flexible than you think you can. And if you can be flexible and live with the configuration that a particular space is configured to, you can
Save
save the
a
money,
ton of money.
save the landlord tenant improvement money, and save yourself money. And guess what it allows you to do is to have a short-term lease. You could do a 1-year lease,
And get real cheap rent.
get cheap rent, have fewer strings attached. If your business doesn't survive or needs to downsize or upsize after a year, you've got that flexibility.
Great flexibility. And the landlord will probably leave you there and he'll want you to stay, so he'll make some concessions, except if the market turns up, which is not likely right now. So what does it cost to do improvements now? Can you give us a handle on that? Because that's going to be a driver in what the ultimate rent is, and all the factors around moving into a space and making it yours. Somebody's going to have to move that wall 18 inches. What is it going to cost?
A lot.
Thank you. You heard it here on ThinkTech.
Yeah.
Forging new ground.
But some of the listeners might have caught on that we always talk in per square foot, because it's not like selling a 2-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom house. It's X number of square feet, and everything is priced on per square foot. So improvements just to paint and carpet a space could be $10 to $15 a foot. So to put that in perspective, a little 1,000 square foot office could be, it could be $10,000 to $15,000 to paint and carpet it, which tenants go, no, can't be that much. Well, I don't think it should be that much either, but that's what it costs.
That's what it is.
And then move a few walls. You move a wall, you have to move the air conditioning ducting, you have to move the sprinklers, you have to move the lights. You move a wall, you probably have to move a light switch and an air conditioning thermostat, and it adds up fast.
Well, why don't I get my cousin's aunt's uncle's cousin to come in there and do it for me? Do it after hours, no problemo. And do it cheap, maybe free. Why can't I do that, Jamie?
Well, because you're usually doing construction in a big office building that's owned by a big entity, and they won't let you in unless you have the proper insurance and you're a bonded licensed contractor. Otherwise, and so that requires, doesn't allow for a lot of weekend warriors coming in with sledgehammers.
Oh, can you imagine?
Yeah. So that adds to the cost. You need to use our friends who are licensed, bonded, and know what the heck they're doing.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to get clear, though, is you said before that the cost of construction, it may not be built into the first part of a tenant's lease, the first increment of the lease, but later, they'll catch you later. But I think a lot of landlords are going to want to catch you now. Isn't that true? And they're going to say, well, your rent will be, say, $1.40 if we don't do any improvements on this at all. Take it like it is. Be really flexible. Take it just the way it is. Don't move any walls anywhere. But if you want improvements, if you want somebody to go and do this 18-inch silly change, it's going to cost you $1.60, because the landlord ultimately has to recapture this.
That's right.
It can't give away money like that.
That's right.
It's all based on the rate, and the rate changes. The rate will go up because the landlord's going to build the cost of improvements into that rate.
That's correct. Yes.
So it isn't that easy. On the other hand, it seems to me that as we talked, that there's tremendous opportunities now for a tech company to come down here. It also seems, if this hasn't been expressed, that they really ought to use a broker, because brokers don't really cost anything. And the broker can give them the lay of the land and tell them what the real deal is, and what the landlord, to know what the landlord's considerations are, to know what the landlord's analysis is, to pencil it out on a spreadsheet the way the landlord would. That gives you a huge benefit. And to be your mouthpiece. What's that worth,
Yeah, it multiply if you overpay on your rent by, say, 20 cents a foot times 3 years times your square footage, it can be a lot of money.
Even on a small space.
And even on a small space. And I think these guys would be better. It's not, what we do is not rocket science, I have to admit. Even though I was a jet engine engineer.
Is that right?
Yes, I was.
First Yale, now a jet engine engineer. I'm finding out stuff about you. And you probably were a brain surgeon at one point. You haven't mentioned it, though.
I leased myself out of a job. But what we do is not rocket science, and it's something that tenants don't do very often. So trying to learn the ins and outs of a leasing transaction, and then not doing it for say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you're just not going to be as good as someone who does it all day, every day, like we do.
Yeah. Well, how long you been doing it?
Well, I see
you're
these
willing
gray
to admit
hairs.
that, yeah.
20 years, 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, he sounds modest, but trust me, this is a guy who's been on Bishop Street from before they had downtown Jamie Brown, which was a long time ago. What's the difference between a broker who handles office space and a broker who handles, say, residential, for one thing?
Well, I guess the biggest thing is that office space, every space is custom. So you can't really take office space and put it in numbers of bedroom boxes. And every tenant has a different requirement. Some want everybody in cubes, some want everybody in offices, some want a kitchen, some don't care. So it's everything is custom.
So yeah, so a business is it's got to be reasonably suited to the business, and B, the business is likely to change. And it seems to me that the good broker will say, well, not only do I need to know what your situation is today, let's take a look at where you're going and what you're going to need next year, the year after, and let's try to get a lease arrangement that allows you to expand or contract, in accordance with your own development. I mean, otherwise you're going to be in the wrong size shoe somehow.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So would you say it's more complicated or less complicated, more risky or less risky? I mean, would you, for example, if my cousin's aunt's uncle broker was a residential broker, should I just use him? He'll charge me a low commission, or should I make sure to go to somebody who's doing it 20 years?
Well, I sure wouldn't want to try to help someone buy a house, because I just don't know what the pricing should be. The forms that residential realtors use,
It's different.
completely different. A lease, Jay, you help negotiate leases on behalf of landlords and tenants. They can be 40, 50, 60 pages long, and they're completely different than a residential transaction. So
Right. Give you a headache, actually.
yeah,
Or at least an eye strain, anyway.
and there's the other thing in residential real estate, because of the TM or the tax map services, what actual sales prices are. In leases, that's not public information.
So you have to be on the street with your ear to the ground. That's really an important point, Jamie, that you got to be talking. It's that same, networking thing we were talking about, meeting in Tamarind Park. You got to be connected.
That's right.
And and you have this market report that reflects, at least to some extent, your connection downtown, but it also reflects research. And so after this break, you may ask why I say that we're having a break now, but let me assure you we are having a break. After this break, we'll talk about how you do your research for this Honolulu office market report. We'll talk about what research that is and how it enables you to make prognostications. Okay, then we'll tell everybody how they can get a copy of your market report, should they so desire. Okay, now let's take this break. That's Jamie Brown. I'm Jay Fidell. This is ThinkTech. We'll be right back. Stay there.
Well, hopefully we can stir up a little demand for office space.
I guess I forgot to ask you one question: is how's business?
We're having a much better year this year than last year.
Interesting. Why was it down last year?
Our business is a combination of leasing and sales. Sort of leasing pays the bills, and sales is what puts money in the bank. And we had very few of those, and sales have been slow the last few years.
So it's the sales part.
That's it.
It's the sales part. Mm-hmm. This will be our short piece, because we'll have about 9 minutes instead of 12 or whatever.
Okay.
So yeah, I want to ask you about how the brokerage industry is doing. I want to ask you about what the rates are when you make a deal. I want to ask you about the sales versus leasing part of it, and then I want to talk to you about this, and I want to get your prognostications, such as they are. What, do you sit down and write this, or is this a service?
No,
Or
I
it's
write
a
it.
combination?
Personally, I write it. I have actually a guy in Japan who used to live here.
Is it available to anybody who
Yep,
asks?
yep. It's probably on our website. I think it's on our website or Facebook, our Facebook page, or
How many companies are there like yours? Got pretty big already. Huh?
and I think we've got what are we? 3, 6, 8,
Three,
and we've
four,
got a couple.
five, six,
8, and we've got a couple more who aren't on there.
It should not surprise you that we're back. Jamie and I are still here, going in for the long haul on the real estate brokerage business downtown, and downtown is a place for a tech startup, or any startup for that matter. So, Jamie, what's it like, in the commercial brokerage business? You making money?
We're doing well this year, better than last year.
Why is that?
Well, I think that we do both leasing and sales of commercial property, and for the last couple of years, the number of sales has been very slow. And the sales is
I mean, sales of a building.
sales of buildings.
If you have a building sale, you're going to make some big bucks on that. There's millions and millions of dollars.
Well, not quite millions and millions.
Well, the purchase price is millions.
Yes, that's right.
And the brokerage fee is only a small fraction of that.
Tiny fraction, a much too small
Tiny,
fraction.
man. Okay, tiny if you like.
Small relative to residential numbers, but anyways, percentage-wise.
Yeah.
So there's been very few sale transactions in the last couple of years. The handful that we've done have all been owner users,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason it's been those is because there's been the SBA to finance them, because there's been very little financing available for people
It's
to
that
purchase
same
property.
issue, yeah, right. If you don't have money, you're not going to do a deal.
But looking up, there is finally money out there for investors to borrow and buy property.
Where's it coming from?
It's coming from everywhere. It's coming from life companies, from the commercial mortgage-backed securities market, which is the Wall Street sources are starting to be back in the market.
Mm-hmm.
Banks, finally, the banks are lending, although they're very
Local banks.
local banks, mainland banks. They're low loan-to-value ratios, so buyers need to put a lot of money down, which is keeping them a little on the cautious side.
But then you pay a low interest rate right now, eh?
There's some people that say buy everything you can now because the interest rates are super low.
Well, how low are they?
Well, commercial rates, the SBA loans, the SBA portion can be under around 4% or less.
For a business, that's really terrific.
It's cheap money.
Yeah. So that means, loans aren't as good as investment capital in terms of, the cost of carrying it and all that. But loans are cheap money. That's attractive.
Now,
maybe that'll help.
If you can do an SBA loan, SBA will finance up to 90% of your purchase and your improvements. So you buy a $2 million building and you put $500,000 into it, they're going to finance 90% of $2,500,000. And because it's a local bank backed by the SBA, those deals are doable, provided the appraisal comes in.
As a broker, would you help a client with financing?
We will point them in the right direction. We've actually assisted a number of our buyer clients in going through the SBA loan process, in addition to helping them buy the property.
Well, that's encouraging. They say in hard times, you just learn how to cope. You get nimble, you get clever, you get creative, innovative, and you do it. So now what about the rates that real estate brokers like you make on leasing? I remember there's a complicated schedule. It's not so simple, but just so that people understand how that works, how does it work?
In office leasing, we typically get paid a certain dollars per square foot of the space leased, and that can range anywhere from $1 a foot to several bucks a foot, depending on the length of the lease term and which side of the table you're on, and quite a number of factors. It's not as the residential brokers think that we take wheelbarrows of money to the bank, which I wish was true. If it was true, I don't think I'd still be doing this. But
well,
I
commercial
love it.
brokerage, you really have to mother the deal through. You have to watch so many spinning balls, don't you? It's sort of complex, and it's the negotiations are going to be much more sophisticated, aren't they?
Much more, certainly complicated and sophisticated in many cases. You think of a commercial transaction. You have attorneys on both. If you're attorneys on both sides, you
Mhm.
might have appraisers, you might have CPAs,
Mhm.
you might have 3 or 4 decision makers at a company.
Mhm. And an insurance guy to look over the insurance provisions, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So it gets more complicated, and you have to put in more time. Tending the flock, so to speak, herding the cats.
That or one landlord told me, he said, you know what, you guys get overpaid on the deals that you close, but it makes up for
The deals you don't.
the 90% of the deals you work on that don't close. And the transaction cycle is very long in our business. It can be from the time you start. I mean, the shortest deal you ever see is maybe 3 months,
Yeah.
and it might take a year or two from
Yeah.
the time you start on a deal till when you complete it and get paid.
So of every like 10 deals that you start working on, how many actually close?
You know, I don't
Just
know.
remember you're under oath now.
Yeah, I'm
Jamie.
under. Well, we're so good at Hawaii commercial real estate that we close a high percentage. It's got to be more than 50%.
Well, really, competence and effort do make a difference, and
Yeah.
if you can be an instrument in making the thing close.
Yeah.
Huh?
Well, if you don't close a good portion of them, you'll never stay in business.
That's true. Anyway, so I want to get to your report now for a minute. This is a nice looking report, and I just want to know how you make this report. Do you get it from somebody, or did you write it up yourself? Where do you get the data from to make this really nice looking report?
Well, the data comes from, and this speaks to the what we talked about before about people working all over the globe. We have an analyst who used to live here and now lives in Japan, and he pulls the data together and puts it in a spreadsheet for us, or this huge spreadsheet database we have, and then he and I work on it via email, and then we
The
make
global chat room, there it is.
right there, and then I actually personally I write this because I'm in the market with my team doing deals, so you're getting it from the trenches.
So,
And we do it quarterly.
yeah.
It's a lot of work. We post it to our website.
Which is what? I know it is. Wait, I'll tell you what it is. It's HawaiiCRE.com.
You got it.
There it is.
Hawaii
HawaiiCRE.com. Double whammy on that one.
Hawaii C like commercial, R like real, E like estate.com.
Okay. There'll be
Or
a test
find us
on
on-
this at the end of the show.
Find us on Facebook.
Okay. So my question now at the end, we have a minute or two left, and I really needed to get to this to complete my own concept for the show here, Jamie. What's your predictions?
Well, again, we're speaking just about office space.
And you're not under oath for this part of the show.
Well, that's okay. I think that we're at the bottom. I think that through 2013, we're going to see, we're going to muddle along. I think rates are going to kind of be stuck where they're at. And I hope that by the end of 2013, we're filling up office space. And for the landlords, that means rates will eventually start going up. At some point, they have to. We're not building any new office space.
I believe in the fatigue theory. You know the fatigue theory? The market goes up until it gets tired of going up, and then it goes down. The market goes down until it gets tired of going down, then it comes up. It sounds like that.
Well, I'm sure tired of where it's been going, so.
There it is. So my question to you is, when is it going up?
My dart, I would throw it sometimes near the end of 2013. So about a year from now, maybe.
So if I were a tech company, I'd try to move between now and say sometime in 2013.
Yep.
And that I could find a broker, come downtown, take a look at a lot of spaces, compare notes, shop around for rates, shop
That's
around
right.
for space, and maybe join the crowd here downtown where the action is. Wouldn't that be something?
Well, I think you would. They'll generate business just being downtown.
Yeah, just walking across Tamarind Square.
I mean,
Really
we've got
happens.
something like 60,000 people downtown every day. So I think there's customers, there's clients, there's vendors. They're all here.
Okay, and so are the brokers. You recommend this for a career?
It's been great for me. I really enjoy it. I have a fun. Every deal is different, so every day is different, and meet a lot of interesting people like you, Jay.
Well, and you have a good time. To me, the best life is the one with a little sense of humor, Jamie. And I got to say, after all these years, you have that, and it's probably improving like fine wine. That's downtown Jamie Brown. I'm Jay Fidell. This is ThinkTech. We've had such a good time with you here that we're going to come back and do it again soon enough next week. But for Thursday, tomorrow, You'll have David Day, Asia in Review and Pacific Forum, talking about all things Asia and getting you up to date on what's going on. And there's plenty going on. Anyway, this is ThinkTech. Thanks for listening. Aloha. Say aloha, Jamie.
Aloha.
You heard him. He's right. Take care.